today, in the year of our Lord, 2022, we have another episode of You're Already Accepted, a community rewatch, but it's just not another episode of You're Already Accepted, a community rewatch. We are live for our show. I'm joined as always. My name's Jonathan. That's Ethan. And now we got Christian.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
Okay,
triple threat.
I know, true.
Threat.
Is this a triple threat match?
Title is on the line.
And let's get into it. For me, it was just like first how it opened. I always just like love the campus that they use, whatever campus it is in California. But and Annie's passing those things out like catch knowledge, and then Sabrina, the secretary. Secretary is a little degrading to women. I hope the dean do off-seat things. Oh, gender saved. And then this is kind of more of a deeper, like kind of bigger scene, but Annie's speech on like her adulthood or like her maybe lack of adulthood, I thought was kind of interesting because like I remember kind of like sitting there and thinking about there's always like these markers, especially in America and like every culture everywhere, of like what it means to be an adult, like this kind of coming of age thing. And it's like, I know for myself, it's like, at least when I think about like Americans, like us, like it's like, okay, you know, having your first drink or like going to college or and like, I guess in this scenario, it's like sexual experiences and stuff like that. And it's like, it's kind of like interesting to think about like how for her, it's like, no, I don't really, not that I'm not interested, but I'm not.
No, see, it's interesting because I wrote this down for the parts of the episode I wasn't a fan of, but I feel like I'm torn. Because the whole scene of, they get reverse Porky'sed, which I didn't even realize what Porky's was, so I had to look it up and I was like, oh, wish I hadn't. But it's sort of a commentary. What I thought it was is, like phallic humor in comedies. I feel like it's a really low bar to reach. Like the whole, like there's so many, like especially like romantic comedies, like movies, there are entire scenes where the whole joke is just like, oh, they're talking about somebody's like private parts, right? Yeah. Like it's a male's private parts or a female's private parts, and like that's the joke, right? People make fun of Amy Schumer because like that's what all of her jokes are. It's just like my female parts.
Yeah.
and so like a part of me thought that it was like funny that the joke was how ridiculous repetition of the word is, and like being uncomfortable is not like funny. But then I also felt like it was kind of like maybe poking fun at Annie's prudishness too. She's like, I enjoy being suppressed. Yeah. I enjoy, not being able to say what I want. And like, obviously that was like a reverse of the typical like narrative of like sexual expression. The other thing that I think that struck me was Shirley's reaction to that. Like throughout the whole episode, Shirley's like giggling at the thing and like very like kind of, I don't know, implies very promiscuous pasts. And I feel like considering the next episode is about like how religious she is, like it kind of seems out of place for the rest of the series. You'd think that, she would be like the moral compass of the group, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing it, but I don't know, that whole interaction between, Annie, Britta, Shirley, the dean, it stuck out to me. And it wasn't necessarily bad. There are parts of it that I enjoyed, but it was, again, dick jokes aren't always funny, it's whenever that's the whole point of it.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
yeah. Good.
No, I thought that was good. I agree. And like, and that's interesting because like, I remember at the end of that, like Shirley claps for her, like at the end of her speech. And it's like, yeah, it's a very kind of like weird mixed message. But I was kind of thinking it like, okay, so season 1, episode 3, that's the women episode. And like, I like that's, Ethan and I always talk about like the deep lines of the show, but like, that's one of those that really still sticks to me when he's like, go kiss a girl in the middle of the day or run naked through a puddle, but do it for yourself. And I was like, so there's a part of me where I'm like, okay, is this like kind of her like, oh, I'm going to do adulthood my way kind of thing. And like, maybe that's what Shirley's clapping for. But again, yeah, it's still kind of something I think about. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great part about that speech for Annie is I don't think we're laughing at Annie and her wanting to be, what's the term she uses?
She says like comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah.
I don't think we're supposed to laugh at Annie. I think the point is that, like you said, Annie's trying to grow into herself, and that's something we've talked about on the show. Is like Annie is not the person she was in high school anymore. She's becoming her own person, but she's becoming her own person on her own. Like she's not going to be influenced by what other people expect her to believe. She's not falling into kind of the typical way that other people grow up, and maybe her experience wasn't the same, but like that doesn't mean that her experience isn't valid.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that she's not becoming still an adult and learning important lessons. So like, I don't think the point is that we're supposed to laugh at, or I don't think the joke is that we're laughing at Annie being more like prudish. I think the point is that people that want to be prudish and people that don't want to be prudish, like they both still have experiences that are valuable growing up. Annie's experience is just maybe not as common as what some people are used to, where sexual experiences are pretty like common, and that's just kind of commonplace, especially growing up in high school. Like we obviously see Annie mature a lot through the show, and even in this first season, she's matured a lot already. So I think there's just value in different people's experiences. I think that for me, that was the takeaway of this. Maybe, and I don't know if it's like a super deep thought, but just I don't think Dan Harmon's making fun of people who are prudish. I think he's showing that there's
right.
value in their experiences.
I think a lot in Dan Harmon shows, it's that like he's really nihilistic. Honestly, I mean, like if you just listen to him or watch any of his other animated shows, that like he doesn't really take a side. He kind of takes pot shots at every side, and just kind of shows the ridiculousness of it. And we'll see that in the next episode with comparative religion too. And so maybe that's kind of the side of that I took away from it, is the sort of the irreverent humor of like, I'm okay with being suppressed, but I think the larger context is that she's she doesn't want to have to say it, if that's not what she's comfortable with.
Ethan, what you got for A+ scenes?
So there's a couple of really good Pierce lines in this episode. One of my favorites is he's talking to Jeff in the study room, and he's like, she's super smart, if you know what I mean. It makes a cupping motion. Like,
she's got huge tracts of land.
yeah. And like, I know we talk about how like physical humor and like we just talked about like sexual humor, it doesn't always work, but there's some times in the show where like, especially with Pierce, it works because you're not laughing at the sexual joke, you're laughing at Pierce being the one. Like that's of course what he's
not socially aware of what he's saying.
Yeah, not the socially aware guy. But I think it's a good line for Pierce. And then he has another one later where he's talking he meets Sabrina at the party, and he says, well, you must have a great personality.
Yeah.
And she's like, she doesn't even know what's going on. She's, oh, thanks,
Yeah.
And it's kind of a little dig. Like, Pierce is snarky when he wants to be. And even if he's like kind of unaware sometimes and like dumb, he's also got some like really good digs at people.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty good. Shirley's got a good line in this one that I like. She tells Annie that being a virgin in this day and age is something to be proud of. You're like a unicorn. And the line wasn't so much of like a funny line to me, but it just stood out to me as like, there's kind of some truth in that, honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, we already talked about like sexual experiences and stuff, and how that fits into the show, but thought that was a good Shirley line. And then final moment from the show, or from this episode, that I appreciated, I laughed at, was when they're in the office and they're like, everybody say penis.
Yeah.
Penis. And then the officer is like, she didn't say it.
Yeah.
But they like keep going, like nothing happens. So why did you?
They
keep going back.
Yeah, they keep going back to it. But just the way he she didn't say it.
Yeah.
It's like out of nowhere, and that's his first line, I think, of talking.
And shout out to that guy for being in the whole entire series. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Officer Kukowski.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
What you got, Christian?
So for my first A+ of the podcast, I only had two different quotes. But one of them was a Pierce line, and you're right. There's sort of this weird, like sage advice that Pierce gives in a couple of different episodes throughout the series. And I don't know, part of it is, I don't know. I feel like kind of what we know about Pierce and, Chevy Chase in general, it doesn't always feel deserved. Like he doesn't really ever get like his like redemption arc because he leaves the show. But in this episode, he talks about how like there comes a time in a man's life where he stops looking for a place to hang his underwear and starts looking for a place to hang his hat. And I feel like, especially, I mean, like you're talking about like high school experiences, college experiences, even with, the sex ed fair that's going on or the STD awareness event. It's very much, the hookup culture that, even Jeff is kind of doing that with Sabrina with, she's attracted to me and I'm attracted to her. So let's be attracted to each other. But Pierce like really actually likes, I actually didn't write her name down. Who's the call girl? Doreen,
yeah.
right? I was thinking Diane, which is close, but wrong sitcom.
What sitcom?
Cheers.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
But
sometimes you want to go. Okay.
There you go. Exactly. But
actually, I was a little off key. Sorry. Sometimes you want to go. No,
it's all right. It's all right. We'll clear the pipes. But I like Pierce really actually, I think, likes Doreen, and he kind of doesn't treat her well, but I think it's because he's an old man. He's antiquated, which is not an excuse, obviously, of like his behavior, which we never excuse Pierce's behavior. Doreen being in the episode had a good chance for her to say a dig on Sabrina, is telling Jeff that he could do better than Sabrina because she thinks Monty Python is the evil snake from Harry Potter.
That was good.
Which he's go eat tracts of land. That whole quote is kind of funny now. It's double funny now that we've made that connection. But it's kind of something that the reference feels a little dated because this episode is like from 2009 and it's like the height of the Harry Potter craze. But being a nerd, like I still like Monty Python and I like Nagini. Well, yeah, from Harry Potter. By the way, if our audience is too young to know what Monty Python is, it's a trope of British actors from like the 1970s. So there's that. But I thought it was clever because I think Doreen subverts Jeff's expectations by being sort of intellectual and not being in it just for the money. And I think that he ultimately gets her to see that she shouldn't just be with Pierce because he's rich. But yeah, I thought she had a kind of a cool little moment to make that dig.
This is a way off topic, but you kind of mentioned at the end. Okay, so like, was it? I guess last winter I did like just a Frasier rewatch, just by myself. I watched like pretty much all on my phone. So like in my head I have like Frasier sideways. Like I would just like lay in my bed like, that's nice.
At like 2 a.m. So like you don't even remember most of the episode.
Exactly. Yep. It's like, oh, remember the time Roz said, something about her baby? I don't know.
Yep.
But gosh, what was I gonna say?
Talking about the stripper. The stripper. No, the episode I was thinking of. I think it's for Donnie's bachelor party, and we're not talking about Community anymore. But Frasier hires a police officer as a stripper, and he's like giving her points on how to how to do her routine, and then they get handcuffed together. And at the end of it, he's like, "Wouldn't anybody want to go out with me?" She's like, "Oh, I think I would." You know, and it's kind of the same thing. Like somebody that you don't expect to be like romantically interested, like you think of like a call girl or a stripper, like they're these objects that they're not women, but they have personal lives too. So I mean, it's kind of an interesting shade to those characters, those pretty side characters.
Kind of same situation with Quinn and Neil Patrick Harris's character Barney. Because you mentioned Pierce and like how he has money, and like because I was rewatching Frasier and I was rewatching How I Met Your Mother recently, and it's one of those where it's like now that I'm an adult, I think about Barney has a bunch of money and like Frasier has like a really, really nice apartment in this like this beautiful like area in the city. Like it's just like something I don't really think about, or now I do think about as an adult. But like it's kind of one of those things where like I feel like we never really get to see much of Pierce's money actually used. But I guess besides his house, we don't really get we don't really get like an outside view of like his place or whatever. So it's kind of interesting to like he's the rich man character, but like we don't actually see him really
sort of like Frasier, where it's just like money. Like it's just sort of a plot device that it just gets him everything.
Yeah, it's like Pierce is one of those guys that really money is not what life is all about for him. Or maybe that's what we're seeing even in the show is that maybe before Community, before he comes to college, like maybe money was a big deal to him, and now he's trying to figure out what makes him happy. Because money obviously left him. He's been married multiple times. We know he has a daughter, at least one daughter, but he has a bad relationship with his father. Really doesn't have any friends. So we're kind of seeing that like side of Pierce where we do see the money as like a plot device, but he's not just like the rich character that just does whatever he wants because he has money. He's still trying to go back to school to figure some things out at however old he is, 60 something.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. For leading the class, I had Pierce. All of the 7 had good little moments, but I feel like Pierce overall. I mean, there's not a lot of Pierce episodes. We've joked about that before, so might as well give him his due when he can. How about y'all?
I agree. I think Pierce is the leading the class just one in this episode, just because he's a lot more mild in this episode. For one, he's not really super like out there. I mean, there are some moments where he's obviously very old boomer type behavior, but I mean, for the most part, he's pretty mild. Like he even has some good like you mentioned the line about finding a place to hang your hat instead of hanging your underwear. Like he's got some really honestly deep moments, and then his conversation at the end with Jeff. There's another line, I can't remember what he says, but there's just like a really good conversation that they have. And you really kind of get that almost like a sense of like a father-son relationship between Pierce and Jeff a little bit, which we don't always see because Pierce obviously turns into a douche later in the show. But I like that connection he builds with Jeff.
I said that Pierce was the A+ student in class because it's one of the rare moments in professional wrestling. We call it going over. The superstar wins, it's one of the few episodes where I feel like Pierce actually goes over Jeff, because the start of the episode, Pierce is sending zingers at Jeff, and then Jeff is trying to zing back, and then the group's like, maybe not. And then even once Jeff gets Sabrina to go to this date, Pierce is like, "Oh, so you ready for our double date?" And Pierce or Jeff is like, oh yeah, wait, how did you do that? Like it's almost like Pierce is one step ahead of him in this episode, and that doesn't really that hardly ever happens. But I'd say that for sure.
I agree. For extra credit, I only just had one, but Abed was wearing a hat that said ST Defense, which is like, so since we're all sports fans, it's like that's like in my head I was like defense. Like I was like, I get that. Yeah.
Where did he get the hat from though? Because like in the arm wrestling scene, he just sort of puts it on.
No, I definitely noticed that too. Like, where do you get that hat from?
Maybe that's kind of part of the joke. It's so meta that like, oh, he's a joke now, but
could be.
Yeah.
What about you, Ethan?
So one little piece of trivia I found out researching this episode, just because I like my trivia, is that the actress that plays the school counselor and the cop, Officer Kakowski, they're actually the actor and actress are siblings.
Oh, cool.
In real life, and the counselor, like she actually is a writer for this episode, and I think a couple other episodes. Nice, of Community.
Yeah.
So they appear in the scene together probably for that reason because they're siblings in real life. But a fun little note. And then one little thing I noticed, I don't know if it's really trivia, but do we ever see the outdoor eating area again? Like there's a scene where I think Britta and Shirley are eating outside. There's like some picnic tables and like some vending machines outside, which is odd to me that they have vending machines outside. Like, do we see that outdoor eating area throughout the rest of the show? Because I don't like that seemed unfamiliar to me watching this episode.
No, they don't really use that shot that much. I don't feel like
it's sort of like I mean, I think you mentioned it in one of the prior episodes about how it's the show writers are still finding their footing while running the show. Excuse me. It's kind of like in The Office, how like in the first season there are a bunch of like background workers that you don't see ever again besides the first episode. But yeah, I don't think that you ever see it again. But so a piece of trivia that I found is whenever Officer Kakowski tells Pelton that there is a 597 going on in his office, that is actually a police code for animal cruelty. So when Pelton's like, "There's a dog fighting ring in my office," like he's actually right. Like, but it's you don't think that because you think that Pelton's just an idiot. But the other one wasn't really wasn't really trivia. But I noticed that I feel like Jeff sort of reverts back on the lesson that he learns of like, oh, maybe superficial attraction's not all that important. Because then he later on the show, there's Kendra at the QU who shows up in like 2 episodes. I think one of the first episodes of this show that I saw in entirety was the second paintball episode, the first time they do paintball.
Yep.
Or maybe it's the second time. Anyway. And Kendra at the QU comes up, and I was like, oh, she must be a pretty big part of the show. And then I went back and watched it. It's like, oh, she's only in 1 episode. But it's very much the like the cheerleader type, the blonde, the pretty, the type of girl that I would have been really interested in high school. And like the older I get, I'm like, oh, it's not about like physical attraction, because Jeff is like, oh, I can't carry a conversation with her. I got to go make tinkles. Like it'd be an oopsie for me too,
I definitely thought that Sabrina and Kendra with the QU were the same character. Rewatching this, I was like, oh, it's Kendra. And then like, oh, this is Sabrina. Who's Sabrina? I forgot about it in this episode.
Did you see if they recasted her or not? I mean, I didn't look, but
I don't think Sabrina shows up, but I could be wrong.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, did they just cast the same actress? I don't think
it's the same actress. I just think all blonde females look the same.
In terms of like just like final thoughts and marked in red, I thought it was, again, just because being a sports fan, I found it frustrating that we couldn't watch Abed and Troy actually compete. Like, I'd love to watch a basketball scene with them or them like really race. Like, I mean, go ahead.
No, I'd say I mean, we haven't really talked about Troy or Abed, and I don't think that the whole plot line with them was like useless. Like, I feel like you could easily dismiss it like, oh, we had to find something for them to do. I think they actually could have made the narrative really interesting, but I think they kind of went with that trope of like, oh, Abed's the guy that you expect to be really nerdy and bad at sports, but oh, he's secretly really good at everything because like Abed's so meta, he's good at everything, right? And I feel like it wasn't really well deserved. Like, you're gonna tell me that like Danny Pudi, who's like 40 and really skinny, is a better athlete than Donald Glover. So what I feel like, this is just me after I watched it, I feel like it would have been interesting to explore. Because we see this a lot in the first couple seasons of the show that like Troy is obviously still like the high school stud athlete, right? And becomes friends with this sort of, periphery guy nobody likes. So I thought it'd be interesting if in this episode, Troy and Abed go and do sports and Troy is better than Abed. And he sees that. He's like, oh, I'm friends with this guy. I'm not with the high school crowd anymore who are all these really good athletes. And then as the episode goes on, have Troy kind of come to terms with like, oh, well, I'm not in high school anymore. I'm friends with Abed, and even though he sucks at sports, like he's still my friend, and I'm choosing to be his friend. Like, I feel like that would have been a better redemption arc than
in a deeper lesson.
In a deeper lesson, right? Because then you have the whole like, all right, who's the best athlete in the school? it's Abed, not Troy. Which I get. You know, everybody has their own thing in the show. Troy's the athletic guy. I get that's the lesson, but I don't know. I just feel like that would have been a more applicable thing because like I'm not athletic at all, and I've made friends with athletes, and I want to. I'm sure that's probably how they felt about me. Like, man, what take a look at this guy, can't even swing a baseball bat. Like, you know, I just feel like if that was the route that they would have gone, I feel like I would have enjoyed the episode a little bit more if that plot line wouldn't have been so, you know, redundant, overused. Yeah. And it's easy for us to pull holes in the writers because it's been out for 12 years, but it's still, yeah, you're right. I feel like that would have been funny to me, you know, is, you know, and it would have been heartwarming and both at the same time rather than just like, she didn't say the P word, you know, but I digress.
So I'll be the Debbie Downer. I don't buy that Abed's better than Troy at every single thing they do. Yeah. And I know the show is like, out of all the things in the show that I could nitpick on, like, there's a lot of things that probably aren't very realistic, like them having a paintball episode. But like, I don't like, I agree. I think that would have been I didn't think of that, but that's honestly a great idea for an episode. I don't understand why Abed is better than Troy at everything, because we literally never see Abed show any other kind of athletic ability. I feel like,
in fact, if anything, it's the opposite. You know, I think of like the Halloween episode where Troy is the last person who's not zombified, you know?
Yeah. This feels like a plot line that and I don't mind this plot line, but I don't love it. It feels like a plot line that they threw in there just to show that Troy is not like the everyman, like macho man character. To show that he has some,
and then they never picked it back up.
Yeah.
This feels like a season 1 episode where it's like it's the typical like, all right, the handsome guy doesn't have a date and he feels insecure about it. You know, the athlete is getting shown up in all the, you know, the comedic ways. If they would have tried to make this episode in like season 3, I feel like it would have been a lot more well-rounded, personally.
All in all, for me, this is probably like a 5 out of 10 episode. Again, like I guess our viewers don't know this, but like when I watched this, I was just pissed about something. So maybe I'm just sour and just like, oh, this like
you start aggressively punching your keyboard.
Yeah,
that's the notes that you get.
Anything right? Like, but what about you guys?
Oh, I was gonna probably give it a 6 out of 10. I didn't realize that I should have put a out of 10 rating. I give it a 7 drumsticks out of a KFC bucket. I don't know what that means. Out of the KFC rocket flavor explosion rocket thing that's in the later season. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think again, there are some seeds of good character development for Troy and Abed, and I think even Annie, like you said, she's growing up. But I think it's not a bad episode if this was any show other than Community. Like if this is How I Met Your Mother, or if this is like New Girl. I don't like New Girl. I'm sorry. But if this is like
takes.
Say it.
Hot take, right? If this was any other show, it would have been a good episode. I feel like this is an okay episode for Community. You know, I feel like the Community set the bar higher later on in the series.
That's well said. Sometimes Community falls victim to like the fact that it has such a high bar that some of the episodes that would have been like pretty good episodes in other shows are just, they fall flat. But honestly, I think this one didn't really make me laugh all that much.
Yep.
Like there's some wholesome payoff for really all three of the plots. I mean, you kind of have a wholesome moment between Troy and Abed. And then I think the Annie, Britta, Shirley subplot, at least in terms of like girl power, is a nice ending just because, and we get a nice speech by Annie at the end about growing up. And then really the Jeff Pierce plot, I think, has a nice payoff too, where we get that dynamic between them and there's kind of a wholesomeness between them, considering that they have a lot of conflict in other episodes. But overall, outside of the wholesomeness from this episode, it's not an episode that made me laugh. And in terms of feeling like a Community episode with lots of zingers and jokes and just great scenes, this didn't do it for me. Yeah. I'd probably give it a 5 out of 10 as well.
Excellent. And like, kind of like I said there, like with Community, something I love is, well, it's like, gosh, what some we've already gone through, but like, well, just like the episode with Chang where Britta cheated on Chang's test, where it's like that's actually very low stakes. Like it's a single test, you know, of probably like 5 they do in that semester for one like low level Spanish class for just a random student. But like because like the way Community does it, like everything just feels like it has so much stakes.
It's elevated, right? Yeah, like Annie breaking in to the dean's office just to look at the dildo or whatever, like. In any other sitcom, like it's okay, just go ask the dean to, you know, go look at it, explain to him that you're nervous, but you want to do a good job. Like he would appreciate that. Like, no. Like this is, I mean, they call it Reverse Porky's, right? Which is a whole movie about like voyeurism or whatever. But, you know, it's turning this, you know, really ridiculous situation into something that like is a heightened sense of reality, but you can understand what Annie is concerned about, I guess.
On to Comparative Religion. What do you guys got for A+ stuff?
there's a lot of lines in this one or maybe not lines, some good scenes from this episode that actually made me laugh.
Start with the obvious one first.
Which one? There's a lot of obvious ones. Which obvious one are you talking about?
The one that I highlighted.
Oh, well, yeah, obviously we get the Chang legendary meme. I'll allow it.
I'll allow it.
Which is another example of a meme coming from the show that I didn't know it from the show until, you watch it.
Yeah.
Which there's honestly quite a few more that have, since the show has become big, which I think we've talked about, maybe, or we'll talk about. A couple of good Pierce ones again. And Pierce underrated, some good underrated lines, even though I hate the character overall. That guy wasn't gay. He had a mustache.
Yeah.
And then Pierce just talking about Laser Lotus in general, and talking about Energon cubes. And then whenever Britta asks him a question, he's like, well, just for asking that, I'm back down to a Laser Lotus 4. Like,
I want to be able to eat a ghost.
It's obviously a cult, but
Yeah.
Troy's got a good line, which I think everybody probably knows this one. It's probably one of the more famous Community lines. First time I got punched in the face, I was like, oh no. Then I was like, this is a story.
Yeah.
That's one of those that pops up on best Community lines. The whole Troy teaching Jeff to fight, that whole sequence of them in the band study room or whatever it is.
That was a good scene.
It's a great scene.
Yeah.
There's just a great back and forth between the characters. The Forrest Whitaker face always cracks me up. And then whenever Shirley comes in and they're like, we weren't going to fight. Couldn't think of another word. There's just, and Britta's got some great lines in there. That the whole sequence is really good.
Yeah, Britta's got some sort of deadpan delivery in this whole episode.
Yep.
That's kind of her whole, that's really all she does in the episode is just call it gay. But it's really done. You're like, all right, Britta, put your top back on.
Yeah. No, we've talked about this before on the show, but just the way that smart Britta is just around this first season, it's just so nice. It's
you miss it later on.
Yeah.
In the series.
I love Britta.
Oh god.
She might be my favorite character.
Britta's the worst.
I feel bad for her.
Oh man, Britta's in this.
Yeah.
I feel like this is kind of weird, but I feel like Mike the jock is somehow a believable character. I wrote down, I feel like he's a guy who was in a midlife crisis and took it too far. He found a spot at community college that he hadn't felt since high school or something. Because he has his face turns red when he's yelling at Jeff. He has the fingerless gloves. He has the knock knock, my fist up your balls. That whole thing. But then he walks in and he's like, come on, dude, it's Usted. Even I know that. Yeah. He breaks character, but I feel like that's actually Mike. He's like, come on, you're killing me here. So I think one of my favorite lines that Jeff said, really, again, this was a line I think that would have been more apt in a later season, because he's like, you're just like this school. You're obnoxious. You're cramping my style, and you smell like French fry oil. And Mike's just like, I don't get it. What was that supposed to be? It's an insult. And I feel like talking about how crusty community Greendale is really comes into play in the fourth season of this season. But it's still funny. It's a good comparison. Who do you think to compare your nemesis to a college? And using French fry oil as a insult. But I think the most clever quote is whenever Jeff is comparing religion to Paul Rudd. He's like, I get the appeal. I don't want to deny it for anybody, but I'm not going to stand in line and wait for it. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm both religious and I like Paul Rudd. So okay, that's a fair comparison. I'm not making Paul Rudd to be a religious figure or anything, but it's that's a very, again, it's a clever comparison. They didn't say, oh, religion is the opium of the masses, like Karl Marx, whatever, something. It's a fair comparison. Paul Rudd's not for everybody, religion's not for everybody. I get that. It's for me. That's cool.
I think we also get a sense of how a little bit dated the show is, because this is pre Paul Rudd becoming maybe one of the biggest guys in Hollywood, at least for a while after
the Paul Renaissance.
Yeah, it's because this is I Love You Man, Paul Rudd, and Clueless, and maybe I can't think of the other
Babyface. Pre Bobby Newport,
but pre Bobby Newport. Once he gets into the Marvel universe and he's Ant-Man and everybody loves Paul Rudd, this is I feel like this line, it works because I know what he's trying to get at, but this obviously shows that if this show was written 10 years later, it would be be another actor.
Timothy Chalamet or
yeah.
Bobby Newport has never had a real job
in his life.
Bobby Newport.
Yeah, what did you have for Jonathan? What would you give an A+ in this episode?
Again, I was pissed watching it, so I feel like I did a bad job.
Nothing. I need fighting lessons from Pierce.
Yeah. Pierce goes, "What are you, a North Korean seamstress?" And I love the idea of just like a reference for reference sake. Like I didn't take the time to look this up or like look up if he's like referencing a certain thing or
I don't think there is one. I think it's just that like ridiculous of a
exactly
of an insult.
Which is why Pierce's insults work, because they come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But they're oddly funny because they're so specific.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, well, not if it's bad. Well, not if it's bad, you know.
For leading the class, this one though, I had Shirley. Although I don't really like her angle that much, and like just her. Also, this is okay. You know, it's one of those things where it's like when somebody points out something to you that's annoying, now you can't unsee it. That's like Shirley's voice to me in this one, where it's like because she does like so much of like the nice like hello Amy. Yeah, it's just like.
I want to punch you in the face.
Yeah, like I can take it sometimes, but like now I just hear it every time, and it's like I've shared this one with Christian before, but just for any Brooklyn Nine-Nine fans out there, watch out for like seasons 3 through season 7, where like Jake Peralta has like end every scene. Like every time they go to before a commercial break, it's like Jake Peralta like giving like a oh no or like something
a one-liner. It's like this is not necessary. You could get 10 seconds out of the scene, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It could be like Santiago being like, and that's when my father left us for the first time, and Jake will be like, oh gosh,
oh dang,
cool. Like, come on,
wait,
Jake.
what?
Yeah. But
like once you see it, you can't unsee it. You're like, gosh, dang it.
So that's how I feel about Shirley in this one. But I feel like Yvette Nicole Brown is just doing so much work in this one, where it's like she just has to stay in that mode, and like I feel like she just works the hardest. So I just respect that.
It's like we need to clarify, we're not slandering Brooklyn Nine-Nine on the show.
Oh,
not at all.
We love the show.
Yeah.
Andy Samberg's a genius, but like, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I got Britta for leading the class on this one, just because I feel like I mentioned earlier, like the scene where Troy is teaching Jeff to fight, and like Britta's in there just like commentating the whole time, and she's got some like really good one-liners. She's got some really great lines about just like how fighting is like gayness coming out and stuff. But then she also has the great speech at the end to Shirley about like family and like she's gonna go support Jeff. And I said it earlier, but I love Britta, man. I love me some Britta. I think she's underutilized in the show. I love that she gets her moments to shine, especially in season 1. And this is one of her probably like top 3 episodes in terms of her like character just shining, and like in terms of comedy she delivers, but also in terms of wholesomeness and like this whole sense of the show of like it being a community and a family like atmosphere. She, I think, is the most important character for this episode for me, just in terms of that. And also the way she handles that girl in the fight is just awesome as well.
Yeah.
Like you can tell Britta's probably been in a couple of scraps before.
Up in New York.
She lived in New York.
Up in New York. Yeah.
No, but like Britta's the coolest like character in this episode.
Oh,
and like in the coolest character in a couple episodes. Because like obviously I love Jeff, but like when he got those first like couple punches by Mike, I was like, oh come on, Jeff.
It
like,
reminds me of whenever he gets beat by Betty White. He's like,
yeah.
I respect you.
Yeah.
That's why you fail.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What about you, Christian?
So I actually had an entire like Dave Meltzer 5-star review written out, but then I decided not to go with that. I felt like Abed was definitely a loser of the fight. You know, like I was trying to look at the fight scene in general. I watched it through a couple times because like he quote unquote started the fight, you know, by not giving, you know, Mike the cookies. And I'm not victim blaming here, but like he even says like, am I going to get some retribution from the villain and finally stand up for myself? And he never does. If you watch the scene like in slow motion when the Florence and the Machine song plays, like he just sort of like runs around and like gets hit in the butt with a Christmas candy cane or something. The only thing he really does is like stand there with a crane pose, which is like kind of funny because, you know, he's like movie referencing. But I was like, man, it would have been cool if like, you know, he just sticks his foot out and Mike falls and like they don't even fight. Like it's just like, oh, this whole thing, you know, Mike's macho-ness is outdone by Abed's, you know, cooler head prevailing. So I definitely thought he lost the fight. And I thought that Pierce also was a loser of the fight because like going into the episode, I was like, man, Pierce Hawthorne and even like Chevy Chase, like I could reasonably see him in a fight. Like he, you know, he puts his dukes up. He like shows Jeff how to punch. You know, he's like he starts delegating to Troy and Abed, which is kind of racist, but that's beside the point. But then like when the fight scene starts, he like rushes forward to start fighting, but he doesn't actually do anything. If you watch him in the background of the scene, like he, you know, kind of stands there looking around, waiting for somebody to come punch him, and he holds up like I think a severed snowman head or something like that. But he doesn't actually do a whole lot except for punch Jeff. So I was like, come on, man! Like you gotta throw a few punches here, especially since, you know, your character work needs a little bit to be desired. But you know, I thought Shirley came around at the end. You know, she had the hat trick of realizing like, oh, I'm kind of been bigoted. You know, I don't want to do this, but if this is the family that I have, I need to support them. And then it's December 10th, hitting the guy with the candy cane. I felt like that deserved a win. You could talk about Annie spraying somebody with the powdered snow, right,
or whatever.
But all in all, Mike's female friend was definitely the loser. Because she got her butt kicked by Britta, and then also I think Jeff hits her too with something at the end of the scene.
I was looking for that. I was like, I wonder if they're gonna do like it's 2009,
right? It's progressive, right? It's like one of the last shots that you see. But so yeah, she definitely lost the fight, and I think Mike did too.
Ethan, what you got for extra credit? What do you guys got?
Well, interesting fact: Donald Glover is actually a Jehovah's Witness, just like Troy in real life, which I didn't know. And then also just a little fun like nugget: Anthony Michael Hall, who plays Mike brilliantly in this episode, I might add. He's Chevy Chase's son in the Vacation movie, so a nice little like call back there, big connection there. I'm not sure if that's why they asked him to be Mike in this episode, but I thought he did a great job.
That's some cool.
I kind of wish we would see him more like throughout the rest of the show. I'm kind of shocked that we don't see Mike show back up just because he's such a loud, obviously doesn't like Jeff. So like, why don't we see him? I think we see him in a paintball episode. Maybe I think Christian and I talked about this. He is in one of the paintball.
He's going to shoot Fat Neil or Neil. Anyway, so I think if I could wrap us up with the extra credit, or have you shared your extra credit? Anyway, Yvette Nicole Brown is actually a Christian in real life, which is interesting, but she's definitely not as over the top as Shirley. So that was, and we'll talk about this with our Marked in Red, but I really do. It does kind of, I don't know, the whole, like, obviously this episode is called Comparative Religion, but the dean has Mr. Winter as the secular, the non-denominational Christmas character, holiday character. And the whole joke of like the PC-ness of it all, the political correctness of it all. I don't know. I just feel like that's kind of a thing with institutions nowadays. It kind of reminds me of the whole STD awareness fair in the last episode that the Greendale did, and the college that we went to. All three of us actually did a like sex in the student union during the COVID semester, and they like started like giving away sex toys to all like the like people who liked tweets or whatever, and they actually like got some flack from like other like university like groups, which is just sort of, it's I get what you're trying to do, like it's progressive, but whenever you're so in sync with trying to be PC, right, like it comes across, you end up with Mr. Winter and the Greendale human being riding in on a tricycle, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. I get the appeal to it, but it was just something I noticed from the episodes.
Well, it kind of like, speaking of that too, like we kind of saw that earlier in the series where there was a line where it's like, our color wheel starts with seal to seal steel. And it's like, and like Jeff says it like he's like, oh, anti-racism is the new racism.
Yeah.
And like, I was thinking about that the other day. So we're all football fans, and Mike McDaniel's the new coach of the Dolphins. He's mixed race, but he's just very light skinned, like mixed race. And I remember I was watching a clip of somebody find that out on TV. They're like, look at another white coach. He's like, oh, actually he's mixed race. He's like, oh, okay, so he counts. So it's like the way they talk about it is like kind of gross sometimes, where it's like, well, like I see what you're saying, but yeah, when you're trying to be like so inclusive, it can sound like really.
Because I think the people who are sincerely trying to do it for the right reasons, trying to make everybody feel included. But then again, you get Mr. Winter, and it's like, oh, you're trying not to step on any lines, and so you're just sort of floating off the ground. Like, yeah, that's weird.
For sure.
Any final thoughts?
Again, for me, I just probably because I was just upset, but I just not feel this episode. I said 5 out of 10 to be nice. Honestly, like emotionally, I was like at a 3 out of 10. So, but what do you guys got?
So if I had to rank it, I would say 7 burnt light bulbs on a string of Christmas lights. I think that's a good thing. I don't know. I like the episode. Again, I know that the idea of Shirley being religious is paired as like her character trait, sort of, how Pierce is racist. And like the thing that bothers me is that like people like that exist in the world. Like people like Shirley exist who call themselves Christians. And like all three of us are Christians. And I don't think any one of us would call the menorah what is it, like a Hanukkah holder?
Something like that.
Right.
Oh, gosh.
And
yeah, I didn't know you were a Jew.
Next time you can say the whole word.
Yeah.
Jewy? But Jewish person, right?
Yeah.
And so like I'm not trying to be like the triggered snowflake. I can't believe they put that in a like. No, I get it, but I do take a little bit of like rub from Britta's whole like, oh, you're banning Jeff from the party. That's not very Christian of you, and just the whole idea of like Christian morality doesn't matter until you're using it to point out the flaws in other Christians' morality.
Yeah.
Like, call her out on it, but don't act like you're using it superiorly. I don't know. I don't
like
know.
using it honestly.
Honestly, exactly, right? And technically, you know, Jesus did tell a parable about a wedding guest who got thrown out of the party because he wasn't doing what was asked of him. He didn't wear the proper attire, which isn't you know, a parable about like not wearing a tuxedo. It's that the guy knew about the severity of the party and like what it meant, and then he still had time to prepare and didn't do it, which is what I always was confused about growing up. I just thought like, oh, well, screw you for throwing out the homeless guy who doesn't have a robe. But like in the context of the story, like the guy was thrown out because he knew what he should have done and he didn't do it, right? So like technically it is kind of Christian of if you're a loose constructionist, right, of that. But I do get the whole idea of like, yeah, this is your family. Like Jesus ate with tax collectors and sinners, right? The people who weren't super religious the way that he was. So it's a thing. It's a thing. So again, seven burnt Christmas lights on a strand of light bulbs. So
Yeah, Shirley is just too unlikable for most of the episode for me to really like this episode that much. I mean, I'd give it like a 6 out of 10, but she's too unbearable. You talked about her with her voice earlier, and just the whole judgmental like Christian trope. She comes around at the end, and I think there's some good commentary there on Christian love and, you know, family, but overall I don't know. I don't know if it really works for the show in my mind, but it's not a bad episode. I think the ending is good. It's a good family episode, especially after we had the Halloween one where they all kind of come together. It's ironic that it's all holiday episodes that do that for Community, but just a good community or family feel, I guess, a good community feel for this episode. And I know we've talked to you before about like Jonathan and I think on the last episode, like physical humor for the show, especially with like toilet humor as well, but like that doesn't really work for Community. But I feel like the exception to that is this episode with the fight, because like there is a lot, it's basically built on physical comedy and then like getting punched and stuff.
Pierce kicking Jeff in the shin.
Yeah. And like, or punching him in the face. Like, I think it works for this episode just because it's so like, that's what the point of the episode is that violence doesn't solve everything. And we're not laughing at like, oh, that guy got punched in the face. I mean, we are kind of, but I think it works. I know I'm dig on physical humor a lot and how like it's kind of a cheap joke, but I think the fight scene in this episode I think is great. So it's not a bad episode. It's solid, but not great. A pretty good Christmas one though overall for the show.
All right, well, that is it for episode 6. You're already accepted. Have a good day, y'all. See you later.
Peace.